You intro.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name is Robert Winters.
And I'm Judy Nathans.
And today is July 26th,
Yep.
2016.
Day 2, Democratic Convention.
Yes, that's right. And as we speak, they're actually running through the roll of the states.
We're on Arizona. Yeah.
Judy is
I'm watching
carefully
on my little phone
monitoring things here.
Yeah.
A few things to say for this week. For those who are regular Cambridge Inside Out junkies, perhaps you watched last week where we were not actually on the program, but we pulled out. I pulled out one of my old VCR tapes from my vast collection of junk.
Yep.
And was actually true story.
Yeah.
I was just looking because we had to be someplace else, so we couldn't be actually in the studio.
Public meetings last week.
A lot of meetings. We'll talk a little bit about those. And I said, geez, we could just cancel, or I could go and find maybe got something useful on the old tape, and I just pulled out a tape, threw it in the old VCR. Yes, I still have a VCR.
Me too, actually.
Didn't they announce that
they're not making them anymore? But you can get them at any Goodwill. Really.
Yeah, and I threw it on, and there we was, a two-parter on rent control, and I said, oh, this is priceless.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've been getting a lot of reactions from people over the
I watched them just yesterday, and as I was telling you, I had a 6-year-old at the time, so I don't think I paid a whole lot of attention except for the results, and I was fascinated. And that was about a year and a half after the whole thing, because it was summer of '96. It was in '96, the show.
Since I didn't have the tape dated, but they were referencing a paper that Bob Moncrief had
which he did in
written
95, somewhere in 90.
And no, I think it was published in September of '96.
Oh, so it was just before that, which is what prompted this show.
And I think there was a reference in the program to the upcoming elections, which were state elections. So I'm pretty sure it was '96.
Right. State election. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to figure out who mayor was. I think it was Reeves. Was he the mayor?
96 could have been.
Because they kept referring to the some members. It was Henrietta Davis's first, or the rent control vote was her first.
Right. Well, whatever.
That was something else. Whatever. But it was fascinating.
It was interesting, and it's the responses I'm getting from people, because nowadays, especially since income inequality and housing costs are like skyrocketing, and people are looking for solutions. It's inevitable that some people are going to say,
"Let's bring back rent control."
Oh, we have to. The only solution is rent control. Personally, I don't have a strong feeling one way or another about it. But the thing is, I think people do need to understand that rent control during Cambridge's. What was it, a 30-year history of it?
71 it was passed?
69, 70.
Okay, 71 I think official.
Until 1994, so I guess 24 years, 25 years. Was it, and I think back about this sometimes, is that the problem for a lot of people was not actually the controlling of the rents, it was the controlling of the property. There were a lot of people, and I, as a first-time candidate in '93, boy, did I get that explained to me when I was taking kind of a middle ground about this, and people said, "You don't understand anything. This is not about the rents. This is about the."
But in a way it is, because you can't. You're told what to do with your property. You were told what to do, what you can charge.
That's certainly true, but the thing is, I think some of the people who are angriest.
You mean pro or for? Against?
People who are trying to get rid of rent control were not doing it just because of the
amount that they could charge.
I mean, if you were savvy, you could sort of find ways to sort of get adjustments and whatever. At least some people.
Well, some people could. Yeah.
Right, but it was things where you just didn't have control of your own property. And I'll tell you one story, and then we'll move on to other things. Before I bought my triple decker, my landlord at the time, we had the one floor of the building still was a rooming house, and there was a woman conducting prostitution in the building. And
in the building that you bought?
And one of the no, I hadn't bought it.
But were you living there?
I was in the first floor apartment.
That's what I'm saying. You're in the building.
It was a rooming house on the second floor. So it was one of the rooming house tenants. They were all women. Was very upset because of this activity that was going on, and I knew it was going on because I was on the first floor.
You knew it was?
And the guys who were coming in and out of the building.
Didn't bother you?
Oh, it bothered me a lot.
Okay.
Right? So I was actually asked to testify in front of the rent control board in favor of evicting this woman, along with one of the other tenants of the rooming house who just wanted to end this.
Wow.
And the rent control board said, she said, sorry, no, can't evict her. There's no reason, and just characterized the entire thing as a squabble amongst roommates.
Oh my God, that's so typical. That is such a great metaphor.
So to me, I thought, wow, that's something. I just thought this was about controlling rents. Boy, was I naive.
No, it's controlling whatever you, You cannot do anything. You do not have any right to do anything you want on your property.
Yeah, so I was sympathetic to the idea of capping rents. In fact, if you were to look at the rents then to today, what I charge, my building may have been under rent control because I continue to charge low. But
that wasn't the
but it was anyway. So it was interesting to get some of the response from people, because there was the reality, and then there's this sort of this.
But you know what the big takeaway was? Sandra Graham, because they said this got to be a state referendum because we did not make the changes we should have. Yeah. And she vouched, she said, we should have had a housing policy and we never did that. And I think it's good that we're doing this master plan now with the vision. In a way, that's what we're doing, right?
Exactly. And people just didn't want to talk about it back then.
Because they had the votes, they weren't going to, and they got what they deserved.
I remember when Sandra was on the council, she used to talk, there was some section, everybody had these, almost like you had to know, have a code book. It says, what are we going to do about the section so-and-so allowances, of rents that were extremely low because some nice old lady happened to charge very low rent in 1969.
Right, and that's what 67 was when they based them on.
That's right. So
I know that for a fact. It's a personal experience.
Your fair net operating income was based entirely on what it was.
On a baseline of 67 and could have been, and I know right now it was like $60.
Right, so you could have one person having a building and right next door another building, identical, just identical.
Right.
But because Mrs. McGillicuddy was charging $60 back in 1967 because she was kind.
Yes.
And then, Joe Schmo was charging
or just the market rate, whatever.
Whatever it was. Because he was evil.
Well,
and
in between. I know, you're doing an extreme. Okay, all right.
So the person who was charging more ended up having their rents adjusted by percentages so that by the time rent, way down the road in rent control, those rents were actually, pretty well up there. But the other one was getting, $100
$3 bedroom for like
$110 or something.
Yeah, crazy.
And there was total inflexibility about changing. And as I say, I remember not to tout my wayward days as a political candidate, but when I ran as a candidate in 1993, I sort of talked about finding a middle ground, and boy, if you tried to talk moderation, middle ground,
well, that's what's happening.
Then you made no friends.
I know. Well, look what's it was amazed me that it compared to me the Bernie or bust and the no, we don't want incremental change. I guess it's because I'm older. Just change doesn't happen. Yes, I'm a socialist at heart inside, but I know what's practical, And
I'm a capitalist at heart, but a very bad one.
You're a social capitalist? Is that such a democratic socialist? Which is what Bernie is. I get it, but these people say, "Oh, he didn't pick Warren." Did you hear what they said to her last night when she was speaking? We trusted you. You didn't hear that?
No, I did.
Oh my God! It's just like. That would have been great for Hillary to put on someone like
but you're right.
Her ticket,
I absolutely see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
There is a certain kind of
it's like
parallel between the inflexibility
that's what it was
of people who were taking sides back then and what we're seeing playing out today.
Let's see where this is going to go. Let's give some leeway to the small property owners. Let's give.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just try and be reasonable.
History always repeats itself. It never changes.
Sure does,
there were slates then and everything. Okay.
Yeah.
So what else?
So anyway, that was last week's show.
Yes.
And
and you're going to try to dig up some more. I think those were fascinating shows.
The holy grail for me would be to see if it was possible that the old original recordings from Continental Cablevision, when the original Cambridge Inside Out show with Glenn Kuchar, Sandra Graham, Tom Rafferty, Marty Foster, and Barbara Ackerman.
Them. I told you that. That's what they do.
I figure they probably did. Maybe Glenn has a few in his basement.
That could be.
I'll try and hit him up for some of those. But I would love to find some reasonable quality. In fact, there may be some folks out there.
Yeah.
Actually, I do know one person who actually has who recorded some of the programs.
Yeah.
And if there are some good programs of the old
they
shows,
would be really interesting. And maybe, and also your idea to bring back maybe some of the people who are on those shows 20 years later.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Oh, yeah.
Like Denise Gilson.
Yeah, Denise Gilson, we talked to. We may have her on.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right.
Anyway, so it was a great show. and I was as happy as anyone to have actually
Okay.
accidentally stumbled
We're on
upon that.
Democrats Abroad. I don't know, I guess that's a D.
Right, we're getting live updates.
Little live
here
updates from the roll
convention,
call
right?
at the convention.
Right, from the great state of Alaska.
Yeah, well, they already passed, so
I know.
they are going.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So
What else
anyway,
you got?
there's in the calendar section of today's
Yes.
this exciting show, the Cambridge City Council has been on vacation for,
Just a few weeks, really.
well, actually till
June 27th
June
was their last one?
27th,
Okay,
right?
so
a month.
Yeah.
And they do have, by tradition, one special meeting that they hold in the summertime, usually at the very end of July or early August. And for this year, it's on August 1st, Monday, August 1st.
But
It's not at the Sullivan Chamber,
So
for
don't go there.
those of you who
Yeah.
love going to city council meetings. They do, as they often do in the summer, they hold it in a nice air-conditioned comfort.
wait a minute, is that why it was warm? It's not air conditioned at Sullivan Chambers?
Nope.
Oh, wow.
That's why they moved it.
That's why it was warm last week. Okay.
Yeah, and I think, if it wasn't oppressively hot,
Yeah.
They might very well have it in the Sullivan Chamber, but
I see.
it's been so 90-ish.
Awful.
That,
Yeah.
so they're doing it up at the Adults meeting room, which is where the
Okay.
school committee meets up at
Great. And that'll be
CRLS.
televised, I assume.
And that'll be televised, but feel free to come up and
Good.
do that. It's always the summer meeting is always kind of it's an interesting thing for me as a person who sort of watches
Covers
this
it.
stuff
Yeah.
religiously, in that you really, sometimes what's coming up on the agenda for weeks or months in advance because it's something big. Like I think last year the car loan petition got. No, was it 2 years ago?
I didn't follow.
I'm already forgetting. 2 years, I think it was 2 years ago.
Okay.
And that got they tried to sort of surprise introduce it in June, but there was a procedural problem. So you knew it was coming in at the midsummer meeting and it was going to be very contentious and whatever. So sometimes you know that.
Okay.
And sometimes you have no idea what's coming down the pipe.
They haven't, when do they post it Thursday, the agenda?
Thursday night, yeah.
Okay.
But sometimes in the summer, for this particular meeting,
I haven't heard anything.
Well, I haven't heard anything at all. But the thing is if you've got a few counselors who've been sort of privately chatting and meeting, they might come up with some sort of spectacular thing where they're going to try and get a lot of attention by trying to do something controversial. So there's always a chance that you're going to get a real nuclear city council order at the midsummer meeting.
Really?
So
All right. We'll see.
Or else it'll be pure boredom, which will be fine by me as well.
We'll report on it.
So anyway, that's coming up this Monday. There are a few other things, just might as well just inform for the 5 or 6 folks who are out there who are watching. Or
we'll watch a little later,
Or maybe watch later.
Yeah.
For those who are watching right now, if you happen to be around Central Square tonight, between 6 and 8, the big project, which was the Mass and Main project, which was the source of a lot of controversy in a rezoning petition a year or something ago. They're having they've done a few modifications. They bought another little piece of property on Columbia Street.
I've done a lot of meetings about this, haven't I?
Yeah.
So is this another one that's for the more public?
I think dating back a year and a half or 2 years ago, there was some discussion about changing some of the rules and procedures with the planning board and people who are coming in for special permits or zoning petitions, not encouraging, but actually requiring petitioners or developers to meet with various neighborhood groups. There's no set way to
I
do
guess
it.
that's what I've been doing. I've gone to at least 3 groups.
Yeah, I think we went. There was one with the Cambridgeport Neighbors Association.
And then there was one with the Better Cambridge.
A Better Cambridge.
So those are 2 I've been to.
And they have 2 open houses here.
Right. So this right across the street,
right across the street at the old Quest Diagnostics.
I think I'll pass and watch the convention, but
At 4:25, I can actually read the address from here.
Right, 4:35 it says here.
And they'll feed you.
They'll feed you?
They did last time. They'll feed you.
So maybe I'll just take my
But they'll have a
CNN
presentation
on.
starting at 6:30 about that, and it's interesting actually. It's
if you haven't gone to it, I think it's fascinating what they're going to be doing.
I mean, even if whether you love taller buildings or not, the fact is that this Mass and Main project for Central Square has the potential to be a real kick in the pants and kind of jumpstart some interesting, interesting new activity around Central Square. We've had some new construction on the periphery of Central Square, maybe down toward MIT, with the Novartis building or the Millennium Takeda project at 300 Mass Ave, but nothing in Central Square proper for at least 15 years.
It's true. Yeah.
During a period when there's actually been a lot of activity everywhere else.
Yeah, well, because it's so contentious too.
Yeah, so anybody proposes anything in Central Square, you're almost guaranteed to have a backlash. So anyway, I think this is going to be pretty exciting. I'm going to go across the street after the meeting.
So you can report on. I'm going home and continuing.
Yeah, come across. I'll buy you some dinner.
No, I am going to continue my convention watch.
You're going to watch the convention watch.
Yeah.
Now, there's another interesting thing happening tomorrow night. I think there was a gathering of the local. Maybe it was the local Cambridge Black Lives Matter group. They had something here in Lafayette Square. And apparently one of the vehicles that happened to be, because, the police are alerted, so they have some vehicles. So they had one of their vehicles that looked a little kind of mean.
Oh, is that what that's about?
Like a Humvee kind of building, that looked kind of military. So anyway, some people got a little upset. So,
is that what this meeting's about?
Yeah, so they had a meeting that was sort of to respond to that, which I find a little weird that the council is doing it, because it's not really a council affair. But they have modified the agenda a little bit, and they're talking about generally.
Pokemon's in there.
Yeah, that's right. So that now the call of the meeting is not just specifically about the fact that some people were a little kicked off about one particular response. They were actually now talking all about anytime there are large numbers of people gathering in a public space, from various walkouts to Pokemon Go chasing and internet-driven meetings.
So this will not be televised? We don't know that.
I don't think it'll be televised.
And who's the chair of the public safety?
It's Craig Kelly, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, so that's tomorrow night at 5:30 at the Sullivan Chamber, unless they change that too, but I think it's at the Sullivan Chamber.
Yeah.
Right. Some other interesting one, of course, you were interested in is on Thursday. There's as well as again on August 2nd. There's an informational meeting on the polystyrene ordinance, which goes into effect October 20th?
Yeah, I guess so.
So this is not, for the average person, maybe it's not a big deal, but if you run a business, small businesses in particular, food establishment, and you use straws or other stuff here, they've all been declared evil.
Yeah.
And coming
come up with an alternative, which still could be plastic, but just not the evil number 6.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's coming up quick. This may be July still, but October creeps up pretty fast.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this Public Works is having a few informational meetings about that.
Yeah.
Again, my intention is not to run through this entire schedule here, but there are a few things I find interesting.
And also just go to Robert's site or the city. You'll find all the dates. Yeah.
There was the Cambridge Pedestrian Committee, which I actually go. They have these really great
Debbie
walks.
Caleb is on that.
Yeah, and so we did a walk. I think did one in North Point area last year. This year they did one, the sort of secret passageways west of Harvard Square, which was really great. So they're actually having a regular meeting, but it's a walking, talking meeting.
Well, that's nice.
I like it when they do that. The planning board has been known to occasionally do that. Meeting at Star Market at 6 o'clock this Thursday.
Which Star Market? on
Mount Auburn.
Yeah.
And just so
that's way out there.
They're going to walk and talk and meet. So I might actually go just for that.
All right. Well, then you should head on over. You should always to Flat Top Johnny's for the Cambridge watch party for the Hillary declaring the presidency.
Yeah, I had sworn that I was going to not watch a second of the conventions.
Oh my God!
But then
it's wonderful.
I tell you, I didn't watch even a moment of the Republican National Convention.
I did.
But then when I think I saw some, we have City Councilor Carlone outside the window here.
Oh, good.
There was it was yesterday. I was actually.
It's only been one night so far.
I know. But in the afternoon, they were having.
They started 4.
Some sort of the Sanders supporters were going wild in the streets.
Oh, absolutely.
And I started watching, and then one thing led to another. And next thing you know, I was watching the convention.
So did you hear Michelle?
I thought Michelle Obama's speech was great.
Cory Booker?
I only saw little bits of that.
They were great.
Though my favorite moment, might as well say it now, I was going to say this later.
Al Franken.
We went Al Franken and Sarah Silverman were up, and the Bernie or bust subset of the Sanders crowd were trying to shout down everything. Yeah. And Sarah Silverman, who was a Sanders supporter,
very big Sanders supporter,
just looked straight at them and said, "You're being ridiculous." Yeah. And it was the ultimate act of humiliation to those. I thought it was perfect. Yeah. So. Anyway,
so the pedestrian committee, and then all right, there's other things.
I'll just say one other quick thing. Well, two other quick things. One is also this Thursday, 6 o'clock. I don't go to these anymore, but the Community Preservation Act is having one of. They always do, I think, about 3 meetings in the summer months leading up to a vote of the City Council for funding for various projects that are funded by the Community Preservation Act. I don't go to them largely because the kind of the fix is in. It's always going to be for a certain kind of. Yeah. They're all predetermined, and I'm sure they listen to people. But honestly, it's going to be 80% for affordable housing projects, 10% historic preservation, 10% open space acquisition, and some of the open space acquisition. Not that, but some of the historic preservation will be to preserve affordable housing projects. So. Okay. And this is all good, but to me, as far as a public event where there's actual public input, I find
it's not a hearing; it's basically a presentation.
Yeah, to me, there really isn't.
Well, it says it's a public hearing.
Yeah, it's a hearing, but I'm just not thrilled. And then again, on Monday is the City Council meeting. We're coming back,
and then we'll talk more later.
Yeah, I'll have a little bit about that. Yeah.
So what else here?
Some other things we went to.
Oh, a couple. I was at both.
Yeah,
last
so
week
as was I. So last week we didn't do this program because there were a couple of pretty significant meetings up at City Hall.
What was the first one? Airbnb?
The first one was actually really informative. It was about short-term rentals.
Oh yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Airbnb. Yeah. And I don't know exactly whether it was phone calls to city councilors or whatever, but it was
Craig Kelly. Very well organized. A lot of people.
His aide Will was had done a little research, pretty much to just sort of quantify how much Airbnb or similar type services. How much of that activity is actually going on in Cambridge? I had no idea.
Yeah, I should have brought my head. I took notes, and I had notes on how many postings they have in Cambridge, but I don't have it with me.
Yeah, but it was actually much more widespread than I thought. Yeah. And a lot of people came out.
Yeah, well, I think the Airbnb folks really got out. The people that do, people that actually live in their proproperties and rent out a room.
And there were a lot of people. I think Denise Simmons was very much concerned that a lot of people who were doing Airbnb were actually doing it in violation of the law, but not because they were trying to be bad guys, but because they didn't know that there were certain zones in the city where it's permissible and certain zones where it's not.
Oh, well, that's true, right.
So they want to basically say, let's either make it more permissible or let's at least make sure everybody knows the rules.
Well, I think that wasn't a recommendation that they register with the city too, so and they're all for that. The Airbnb said you should be doing that.
And I'm gonna just predict that come this fall that the city council will actually embrace the idea and they'll just basically make it so you don't have to do it.
Well, I think the state's already, Baker, I didn't follow it, he wants to impose a tax.
Right, and the Airbnb people
and if they can do that statewide, then at least each city doesn't have to do it.
Yeah, so, but one of the more interesting revelations from the Airbnb representative.
The guy that talked about his mom?
Yeah, he's actually, I think he used to be either a city councilor in Chicago or in and around
I made
Chicago.
a mistake of saying, oh, wow, I'm going to go see a Cubs game in Chicago. He said, I'm a White Sox fan. But anyway.
Right. But he said, he basically said that the typical person who's conducting Airbnb in their homes is typically a 60-year-old plus woman.
Getting extra
typically
income.
is, basically they're either empty nesters or whatever, and they're getting a little extra income. Yeah. And more often than not, they're not doing it necessarily to just sort of, generate a lot of income, but they find it interesting.
Right, it gives them
you meet a lot of
people, especially if they're widow or widower.
Yeah, they give a sense of purpose there.
No, I like it. It just and they all that spoke, they said, I'll pay my taxes, I'll register. So that's all. It's the people that like you said, the people that are now converting condominiums to Airbnbs.
Yeah, that's right. So that's still a big concern.
So they're kind of like hotels.
Yeah, so if it's a person who's actually an owner-occupant of a building doing it, I don't think anybody's going to object to that, really.
Right.
In fact, they may even liberalize it a little bit more.
Kind of like the over-rent control.
Yeah,
occupied.
right. But there are some known examples of people buying up units or buying an entire
Or they own
triple-decker.
an apartment, maybe a 12-unit building, and they're keeping 3 of them for Airbnb.
Yep. So they're just essentially operating a hotel.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of just an owner-occupant who happens to have a spare room.
Can I just give a quick report?
we
We're
got
on,
updates.
we're on Iowa, and she's now at 1,048 for Hillary.
Yeah. How much does it take to get nominated?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I forgot. I should know.
2,300?
We should know.
Yeah, we should know.
So, anyway, they're moving along, right? Well, maybe during the second half
So
hour
where are
of
the
this
Bernie
program.
ones? I don't get it. All right, needed to win is 2,382.
Yeah. So there's an update for that.
All right.
Now, the second hearing of the... It was also one that was a threefer. I think it was public safety, neighborhood long-term planning, et cetera,
Yes.
and something else.
I've never seen more bicycle helmets in my life. They all came in.
A lot of people showed up in bicycle helmets. I mean, it was undeniably spurred by the tragic death of a woman in and around Inman Square. But the real crux of the meeting had to do with potential redesign for Inman Square. Though some certainly would love to redesign everything in the world, in the city.
Right.
But it was specific to that. And they kind of put out in a much more public way some of these proposed redesigns for Inman Square that we certainly talked about a bit on this program.
Right.
And there were a little more detail, actually, they threw in about some short-term temporary measures to help kind of clarify, bicycle right-of-way as they pass through. But I've actually gone on purpose recently, ridden my bike through Inman Square. It's not usually, I used to be, but it hasn't really been part of my routine for a long while. So I was actually riding through there just the other day, just to kind of get a sense of it again. As a pedestrian, I know it's horrible.
Right.
As an automobile driver, I've sort of mastered it, but it's not great.
Not if you're coming into Cambridge or the other way, and then you have to cross over to where the hospital is.
Yeah, some of it's pretty crummy.
It's bad.
But as I went out to do it again on a bicyclist, and sure enough, it's horrible, and I always knew it was horrible.
Yeah.
But I want to just sort of remind myself how horrible it was. So anyway, I'm looking forward to some improvements.
Yes.
And I think everybody's going to be pretty much on board for some kind of
Now, are they having a
improvements.
second meeting about that? I noticed there's a meeting later this...
That's possible. There are some scheduled meetings, but they haven't listed the comments. So anyway, we're pretty much out of time for this half hour.
Look at that.
We'll come back in a few minutes here.
I'll keep you updated.
So this has been Cambridge Inside Out.